Hi, I'm Mary Baxter, and this is That's My Story, where we talk to interesting people in our community. And today I'm talking to John Watson, who is going to tell us about something that we often read about, about riding the rails in a period in his youth and what he learned from that. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Oh, well, I'm so glad that you're here to tell us your story. It's a fascinating one. But let's go back to the beginning. I guess your childhood. You were born. Where were you born?
I was born in Toronto, and my parents had lived with my grandparents for a year before they moved to Willowdale. But I spent a lot of time growing up in North Toronto in my teens after my parents had separated.
Okay.
So quite familiar with Toronto, the West End, the East End, and North Toronto.
And but moved around a bit because of your father's work.
That's correct.
He was what did he do?
He was a teacher.
Okay.
And he taught high school. He ended up retiring as a professor at the Faculty of Education, U of T.
Okay.
But prior to that, he was got a lot of promotions. So consequently, we moved every 2 years. Mm-hmm. On one occasion, when we went to St. Catharines, it was only for 8 months. Mm. And so it was difficult when you, at an early age, when you develop friendships, and you were uprooted 2 years later.
Yes.
It manifested itself in my adolescence.
Okay. But you also have a local, very local connection that goes back a number of generations.
That's right. I'm blessed to be able to, after talking with you today, I'll be able to go back to the cottage just 8 clicks up the road on Snake Island.
On Snake Island.
Lake Simcoe. And my grandparents had a cottage originally on Big Bay Point, and they knew somebody on Snake Island, so they pitched a tent. And it's right next to the Indian Burial Grounds, which is a very sacred place and a special place. And my grandparents' friends were on the other side of the burial grounds, so they fell in love with the place.
So that was a place of safety for you and comfort and joy, I guess, as a child.
It was wonderful.
You spent summers there?
It was a sanctuary.
Yeah.
And because I was going up there every year of my life, the friends that I developed, I kept the friendship year in and year out.
So though you didn't manage, the friendship thing was difficult for you on the mainland because of moving, but on Snake Island you had
that
some
continuity.
Okay.
Year in and year out, yeah. So that's something, you never lost those friends, and I know some of those people today still, so it's great.
Yeah.
You know, 60 years later, 60 odd years later, right?
That's great.
Yeah.
So so in your childhood, besides the moving around a lot, it wasn't a happy home. Is that correct?
No, and the other thing I wanted to mention about the cottage, my father didn't go up there very often, so consequently, we were free of him for most of the summer. He felt very uncomfortable up there because my Nana in particular was a very strong person, and she would stand up to my father. My father was a controlling kind of a personality.
And those grandparents were your mother's?
Yeah, that's right.
Parents, okay.
I called them Nana and Grandpa.
Yes, yeah.
But growing up with my father, he had a dysfunctional father as well, and it got passed on generations. And my father just he didn't know how to express love on a holistic way. For him, love was a way of controlling. I'll give you something if you do this. There was always conditions placed upon it, but it became abusive as I grew older.
Probably, as a teenager, as teenagers are, you probably pushed back.
Well, actually, my parents, I was 15 by the time my parents had separated, so by the age of 6, my father was affecting me in a psychic level and damaging my self-esteem.
And how did that manifest in you?
Well, when you grow up and you keep being reminded that you're a wimp, you're useless, you won't amount to anything, that becomes ingrained in your psyche. And as you grow up, even if it's subconscious, it's still there, very powerful. And then the addiction came along, the alcohol, the dope, the drugs, and they all just took over. And my life was very confusing at that time.
Very dysfunctional.
Yeah, yeah.
To use a tag word today, right?
Yeah.
Dysfunctional.
My mother hated that word. I used to say, we got a dysfunctional family. But
Well, there's a book called All Families Are Psychotic, but there you go. And so then you got wanderlust.
yes.
And
Yeah.
how did that come about?
Well, between the ages of 7 and 9, I used to hop freight trains for about a mile with my brother, Ian, and my youngest brother, Alec, was too young. And we would get off a mile later. It was a slow-moving train, and that kind of was something that I never forgot. So I first started traveling when I was 18. A friend of my mother had a construction job lined up for me, and I was like 120 pounds soaking wet. So I got a free train ticket all the way to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I went out to meet the man, and his wife answered the door and took one look at me and could hardly contain her laughter because she figured I wasn't even strong enough to hold a hammer. So the job was gone. I had a dime in my pocket, and so I decided to stay. And it was a great experience. I fell in love for the first time at 18. This was 1969. So, it was a great experience. I was only there for 19 days, but it seemed like forever. And then I hitchhiked all the way home, 2,100 miles, 54 different rides, I believe. And it was in my blood then. So when I went to South America with a friend of mine from Toronto, Peter, we'd known each other in North Toronto for quite some time. We used to play pool, cards, and things like that.
Is that where the rail hopping came in?
No, the rail hopping came in 1973 when I went down to South America with Peter, a friend of his sister that she was going out with. Her boyfriend owned a hotel in Bogota, Colombia. So there we were. We get off the plane. First thing that happened to me was my brand new beautiful acoustic guitar got hauled down and smashed on the tarmac. Well, the sound box was damaged. So there was a palm tree. Never seen a palm tree in my life. I couldn't speak a word of Spanish, and neither could Peter. And we got ourselves into trouble with the law, getting drunk and stoned on top of Mount Sorate, which overlooks Bogota. So 1973, on the way home, my dream back then in 73 was to go to Machu Picchu in Peru. But I'd spent so much money on dope.
Bad living.
Bad living. We won't go into that. Anyways, I got as far as Ecuador, and my money ran out, so I had to go back to Bogota, where I rendezvoused with Peter. I took a bus, which takes forever up in the mountains, and I was very uncomfortable because I couldn't speak the language, so I kept hearing the word gringo, gringo, gringo on the bus. But anyways, Peter and I went to Panama. We flew from Bogota, and from there we took buses all the way through. Now, when we got to the border, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, we were having some difficulty, and of course we couldn't speak the language. So this wonderful friend of mine, Alice, who's very prominent in the book, had taken me under her wings and smoothing everything out for us. And so Peter went back to Toronto, and I stayed in Guatemala because Alice had just returned from sending her brother off to South America. So I got to live in Guatemala for a little while before I left, and I hopped the freight train when I was when I got to El Paso. I took a freight train all the way to Beaumont, California.
Now, you had some literary influences that Jack Kerouac.
Absolutely.
And
Woody Guthrie.
And Woody Guthrie. Because
yes.
They wrote about being on the road and.
That's right. Free spirits.
Free spirits, and you identified with that a little bit. Is that correct?
I certainly did. You know, Jack Kerouac's book On the Road and Woody Guthrie's book Bound for Glory, which is his autobiography. just exciting adventures and meeting interesting people. And back then I was naive as to the dangers of hopping freight trains and hitchhiking. You know, I wouldn't dream of doing that today. In fact, I don't even think I'd pick up a hitchhiker, even if it was a good-looking woman. But that's just where I'm at today. Back then, it was the devil may care, onwards.
So did the reality measure up to the romance of it?
Well, it was
It's a romantic vision of, you know, free spirits, traveling, hopping freight trains, hitchhiking.
Well, there was the duality going on. There was part of that I loved the freedom, but the other part of my addictions was taking over my life, because I became alcoholic at the age of 12, and my drug abuse started at the age of 18. So in 1973, I was already
you were
22 years old.
Deep into the...
So I was already a decade an alcoholic, an active alcoholic.
So your experiences in South America, you've told me some stories about how they were life-changing for you, because it was a turnaround point, I think. Is that correct? In finding your healthier self?
Well, the book deals primarily with my travels in 1975, which is a 6-month journey, and it was going back to. I ended up going with Peter again out to Vancouver, and from there, I realized I was on my own. So I hitchhiked down the West Coast, down Highway 101, and it was fantastic. My little pup tent and my guitar, and all the way down to Beaumont, California. This time I went the other direction. I went from Beaumont to El Paso, Texas, and all through Mexico. I took a third-class train, which was very interesting, because you got chickens running around and people selling things. And
okay, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
And we're going to be right back. Don't go away. We'll be back to hear more about John's adventures.
I had one little slip there.
Hi, I'm Mary Baxter. Welcome back to That's My Story, where we're talking to John Watson about his adventures in South America and what happened next. So, welcome back, John. So we've got you in South America. It's been a bad time for you. Lots of different adventures, jumping rail cars and hitchhiking and meeting some sketchy characters, but also some good friends.
Absolutely.
But you also had some very positive experiences there that made a difference in your life going forward. So can you tell us a little bit about that part of the journey?
Sure. I can remember 1975, the summer solstice, which was June 21st, was a very special day, because that was the day that Alice got my letter from Guatemala City. And she came to where I was staying at the time, at Lago Atitlan, which is just a spectacular lake surrounded by 2 volcanoes, and all the villages are Mayan villages, and wonderful people.
I think we've got a picture of that lake.
That's right.
With the mountain, right? And I think
you can
that,
see
that
a
being shown.
fisherman in his dugout.
Yeah.
It's a solid piece of wood, hollowed out, and the fishermen use that. But that day, June 21st, not only did I meet Alice in Panajachel, which is the gringo town. It was the only town around the lake. The rest were villages. And also, there was a guy that I'd met in Sylvia, Colombia, 2 years prior. And there he was, the French Canadian. And so I said, "Are you from Quebec City?" He says, "Yeah, but I haven't been there for years." So we figured out where we'd met. It was 2 years ago. He owed me $5. He gave me the $5. Is that unbelievable or what?
Yeah, and you probably needed it.
Yeah, it was just so strange. You know, that was a wonderful
Yeah.
day. A lot of good things happened, but I kept looking at that volcano, and I had to climb it. And it was about, I forget the height of it exactly, but it was the higher of the two volcanoes. And at that time, I was staying in San Pedro, which was, San Lucas Tolima, which is a little Mayan village. And I got to know the Mayan family quite well that rented the house to me. And they had several dogs. So the first time I attempted to climb the volcano was unsuccessful. I wasn't prepared properly. I didn't bring enough to drink. I was, okay, we'll just go up the
and
hill.
we're talking water.
Yes,
Yes.
water.
Yes.
Water and food. So I got about 2/3 of the way up, and then I packed it in. So the next time I became a lot more prepared. And curiously, 4 dogs decided to follow me along the way. Now we got to a certain point where the 2 dogs decided they had done their job and they went home. And the other 2 dogs went all the way to the top of the volcano with me, which was, I didn't know these dogs, but they were my spiritual
Your
guides.
spirit guides.
Absolutely. And I think all they ate on the way up was they ate grass. It didn't even occur to me to give them some water. So they got all their nutrition and moisture from chewing on grass. And I wanted, a lot of people climb up there because they want to see the sunrise the next morning. The view is spectacular. It rained overnight, so I got soaked. My foot was almost frozen, and there's a lot of cinders, sharp kind of like stones from the pumice and all that stuff. So it was, in the morning, I didn't get the view I wanted to, but the whole experience was
Mystical.
it was wonderful, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those dogs were unbelievable, I'll tell you. They accomplished a lot more than I did.
So you've talked about your mom and your grandmothers were very important foundations for your life. This must
Yes.
have been a nightmare for them. No, with you vagabonding
Yes.
around.
Yes.
Did you find what you were looking for in South America that allowed you to come home and be healthier?
Well, South America was a 73 travel. I didn't make it to South America in 75, but I spent most of my time in Guatemala, where I got to reconnect with Alice and her family. And I was part of their family. Her mother, Mamita, her children, Maria, Rita, Pablo.
So that was a good
Lupe.
stabilizing force.
It was, and they
as well.
accepted me just as, and I got to meet Alice's brother for the first time, Jorge. Now, he was a really spiritually evolved person. He was a phenomenal guitar player. And
you were playing your guitar at this time? You were making music?
yes, I was a late bloomer. I picked up a guitar at the age of 21. So by this time I was 3 years in,
Yeah.
dabbling around, and I only knew some riffs and stuff like this. But Jorge was so well developed. He had been in South America and picked up the Brazilian samba and other styles, but he was unbelievable. So, and I was so underdeveloped, but he didn't care. He didn't judge me. You know, he made me
yeah.
feel like so comfortable.
So you got some of the affirmation and encouragement that you were lacking, I guess, as a child.
Definitely.
Yeah.
He was like a brother to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And then you made your way home.
yes,
And
and before I went home, my younger brother Ian decided to rendezvous with me in Guatemala.
Right. Yes.
So we hopped, we took a couple of buses going north through Guatemala. The first ride we got was a truck that had this scaffolding in it, so we had to be careful when they made these turns that they didn't go this way and crush us. So we hopped a couple of freight trains in Mexico for the first time. One was a coal bin, a coal car, so we were pretty dirty by the time we got out of that one. And when we got to El Paso, we took another freight train back to Beaumont, California. And from there, we hitchhiked all the way to Vancouver and took a train all the way back to Union Station in Toronto.
Now, this is it's a long time ago, 40 years?
Almost 45 years ago.
But something's been percolating.
Yes.
In all that time, and
Yeah.
and you've just put on your website, I believe,
Yes.
a memoir.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Well, my mother had given me this diary. It had beautiful Eskimo carvings on the front of it, and each month had different things. That was 1978. So she encouraged me to start writing down my feelings and things.
A wise woman.
So when I was traveling in 75, I decided to keep a journal of the 6-month travel. I just put that in my closet. I intended on getting around to it, but I got into the music so much that the book wasn't really relevant until I hit the wall musically, and then I went back to the book, to the manuscript, and I had to piece it together because some things I had overlapped to make it coherent, and I succeeded in doing that. So it was very gratifying. It took me 5 years, and I spent the time over the winters. When I come back from the cottage in the fall,
Right.
I'd be on the computer all winter until April.
Because you had a full-time job.
Well, I had retired actually in 2011, so
Okay.
that was.
What was your job?
I was a postman,
Okay.
and I spent
Yep.
the last 10 years in Keswick.
Uh-huh.
The last 5 years of my career was the best time of my career. I was friends with everybody in the station, including the boss, and there was harmony. Most of the employees were women too, which was great. You didn't have these male egos, these alpha males running around. That, I put 35 years in the post office. I could write a book on the post office alone. In fact, I've got some anecdotes of my misadventures in the post office.
But so you found your center, I guess, and a happy spirit, I guess, in your last years, and then you worked on your book. Now, publishing your own book is a challenge, right?
It is, yes. You need to get a number of reviews, which I'm just starting to work on now, and I'll be able to put more time into it.
And what's your memoir called?
Stranger's Sojourn.
A Stranger's Sojourn. That's nice. Yes.
It's got a ring to it.
Yes.
And Sojourn
Yes.
is about traveling, but it's about a specific travel. But I thought because I was going back to
Yeah,
Guatemala.
I think there's sort of a goal to a sojourn, right? You hope that there's some growth of some
Well, it's got a nice soft sound to it.
It
Stranger's
does.
Sojourn is kind of like, it's almost musical,
Yes.
I guess you could say.
Well, and you've got that musical piece
Yeah.
to you as well, because
Yeah.
you have some CDs as well. But before I get to that,
Yes.
who did the cover on your memoir?
Well, that's interesting because my brother Ian and I, when we'd come back from Guatemala, it was like a vision he had of the volcano, the very one that I climbed. So that volcano on the front cover is the volcano that I climbed.
And he painted.
He painted it in a
that.
3-piece painting with gaps in the middle, which is pretty interesting. You don't see that all the time. Painting's usually one unit. And inadvertently, the third piece on the bottom was lost, so I replaced that myself. So the painting you see are 2 pieces of my brother's and 1 piece on the bottom.
That you painted?
Yes, just to, it
Oh,
was
that's-
easier
Yes.
to replace than the other 2, which were much more detailed. So.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I did it on my second take. It surprised me. So.
Wow. Good job.
Well-
and then you had I think you had put your music down for quite a while.
Yes.
Quite a while.
Yes.
You got disillusioned with that.
Yeah. Well, I had been making demos since 1986 for a good 20-year period. I got to know I work with prominent musicians from a lot of different bands, and got to know several lawyers in the business as well. And one lawyer introduced me to a couple of people, and the one guitar player, Steve Shelsky, helped produce and record my first album, which is called Minor Details. And then I got...
And you're re-releasing one
I am.
now along with your book.
Yes. I'm re-releasing my second CD, and coincidentally, the coloring is very similar.
Yeah.
That wasn't intended. It just came out that way. But I'm quite happy to have every song available on my CD or the album. The reason why I'm not releasing my first CD is because I'm re-recording it.
Oh, cool.
I'm taking out 7 out of the 13 songs, and I'm going to redo vocals, a couple of tracks here and there.
So we're just going to wrap up.
Okay.
But are you feeling that all these life experiences have come to a good place for you?
Yes,
You're
absolutely.
You've got your home here, your cottage that keeps you happy and grounded.
Very much so, but I have to say that my recovery started in 1977. That's when I went to the 12-step programs. And without those programs,
that's good.
I wouldn't be here today talking to you. I would be
you.
dead.
I have to stop you. We've run out of time, but
I hope I got that little piece in, because that was...
I hope so
if
too.
not, it's okay.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you for watching. Come back again.
Was I a little nervous? Probably.